everyone. Welcome to our first vintage fashion show in the AEC. We're really glad to see all of you here. So this is an event to raise money for both Goodwill Industries and the San Leandro Scholarship Foundation. So every year the Scholarship Foundation raises about $140,000 that are given to students in San Leandro for scholarships. And we're very excited about raising that money. I want to thank the teachers from San Leandro High who, particularly from the art and history departments, who promoted this event to the students, and we're glad to see some students here. And thank you to all the community members as well who've come out to support this cause. I also want to thank all the Scholarship Foundation members who have put a lot of hard work into making fresh baked cookies and brownies, and so you are welcome to stay afterwards and enjoy those. And we have hot tea and lemonade. We also have a photo booth so you can try on hats and have some pictures taken. I also want to thank Shawn Richardson and her amazing team of models. They're here volunteering to raise money for Goodwill Industries, and you'll just be amazed at the dresses and the history behind the dresses as well. So let me bring Shawn Richardson up now.
Hello. Amy, tell me about your little critter on here.
Okay. So there's a story behind this mink stole that I'm wearing. This is from my family. My grandmother was born in 1901, and she grew up on a farm in South Carolina. And the most hated animal on a farm was a mink, because a mink could go into a chicken house and slit the throats of all the chickens in a matter of minutes, and you had no chickens. So the family was very sick with what they called typhoid malaria, which sounds horrifying. And they heard a mink in the chicken house. And my great-grandfather was able to drag himself out of bed and grab a gun and shoot the mink. And so there was great rejoicing, and they made a mink stole out of, out of the mink. Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you. There's so many stories behind these clothes. It's really quite fascinating. But first, I wanted to thank you very much for including us in your event today. We're thrilled to be here. And how many of you have seen our show before? Anybody? Oh, just a few. Okay, there. So for those of you who have not seen the show before, you're in for a surprise. This is a fashion show like none that you have seen before. We have a lot of discord in the world today, but of the 7.5 billion people in the world today, we do have one thing we can agree on. And that is, when we get up, we get dressed. And so we're going to show you over 100 years of fashion today and how people got dressed over many, many years. And we're going to explore that 100 years of fashion. Most of the pieces you will see today have been donated to Goodwill over the years. We've been putting on these shows since the early 70s. And as people have seen the show, they've donated pieces, but many pieces have just been donated directly to Goodwill. So that's, hence, all of these pieces are actual vintage. And many of them have been donated by people such as yourself who've taken their discards out of their closets, put them in bags, and sent them off to a charity called Goodwill, like Goodwill. And hence our name is Goodwill Bags, not Bag Ladies. Nope, nope, nope. And so sit back and relax as we begin our step back in history and some possibly a nostalgic stroll through memory lane. And we start our show with our white lawn dresses. This is just a small collection of our white lawn dresses. This is just a sampling of our many dresses. Can you picture these lovely ladies at a lawn party, sipping iced tea or mint juleps under a majestic oak tree, or strolling in a park on a warm summer evening? Not quite like today. These are extremely romantic, innocently charming dresses from another time, another world. Our first model is Shelley, and she is showing a beautiful piece that's in really quite amazingly good shape. We believe this is a cotton linen piece, and it has a very high neck, very appropriate. The collars are she has a low around the front, but it was originally a very high neck, and they have little stays in the neckline to keep these the lace neck collar up. Now there's also, I believe she has the curved closure, and she has quite a bit of insets of lace, and I think that's actually the chemical lace down the sleeves. So very, very interesting pieces, and of course she's wearing her gloves to keep her hands nice and soft. Thank you, Shelley. Now the term white lawn fabric. Now our next model is Cindy is coming out next, and she's wearing a 3/4 length sleeve dress, probably more appropriate for a young girl. Not that I'm not saying anything about you, Cindy, but usually the 3/4 lengths for a much younger girl. And now these laces were all handmade in the 1800s. Machine-made lace wasn't really around until about 1890. So many of these are handmade lace dresses with lots of insets. And Cindy is wearing a tie, a colored sash. Many of these women would have to diversify their dresses. Unlike us, who couldn't fit another dress in the closet, these gals only had 1 or 2 dresses, so they diversified it, and Cindy's diversified it with a nice sash. Could be a wedding dress, but we don't believe so. At this point, the dresses were all white for weddings. Thank you, Cindy. Now, Francie is showing one with an apron front. See the panels in the front? Very interesting piece on this one as well. Now there's great detail. There's princess tucking, shearing, tucked flounces, scalloped hemlines, window pane, plaid weaves, all kinds of frills and ruffles abounded in the Victorian style. And I love the apron front on this piece as well. But the short sleeves, Francie, I'm not sure. You're showing a little bit too much arm there. Thank you, Francie. Now, Heidi is showing another one, quite a bit of frill to it. And see how different they are? The fabrics are different, the cuts are different, the different lace insets are all quite different. Now, white in the Victorian and Edwardian eras, wearing white was a symbol of wealth and were solely reserved for ladies who could afford the impracticality of white. They were, in effect, a status symbol. It was a way of visually telling the onlooker that these ladies could afford to pay someone to launder their clothes. So every time you wear white, think about that. Thank you, Heidi. And our last model is Lily. Now look at the panels on her bodice here. Very pretty, lots of tucking insets, very, very detailed pieces here. And of course she's wearing her gloves, a must for real ladies, to keep their hands soft and gentle. And she's also carrying a parasol. Do you know what the parasol was used for? What? Sun, yes. What else? Flirting. Flirting, and Lily does a great job of it, and she might be talked into giving lessons after the show. Thank you, Lily. Now, every single one of these ladies just committed an egregious fashion faux pas. Yes, you did. Not one of them. Do you know what they did? Wearing hats? No, they weren't wearing their gilded cage. Now, the corset has been around since 1500 BC, originally from the Isle of Crete, made out of boiled leather. But it was all used for that very elusive 19-inch waist. And the bones or stays were made out of whalebone, ivory, metal, and even wood. They covered mostly from the below the bust down just below the waist, but some were actually all the way down to the knees. Now, they were worn not just for social events, but also for housekeeping, playing sports, shorter ones for horseback riding, waterproof ones under their bathing costumes, and even for childbearing. And girls, there's a young lady here. How old are you down there? 8? Well, by 6, you would have gotten your very first training corset. And by 14, you would have a full corset of stiff cotton. So be glad you're not in those days, right? They were put on with wet cording, so as the cording dried, it would tighten up even more. And there were a host of evils that came with tight lacing. You couldn't stand upright. Difficult breathing, indigestion, spinal curvation, liver complaints, and some chambers, small chambers in homes were called fainting rooms for very good reason. However, if the waist was left neglected, it was feared that it would grow as large as a woman's breast. And there are some gentlemen in the room, so would like to know, I'm sure, that from 1820 to 1890, even men wore corsets to gain that wasp waist figure. So that's the time that has gone by, thank goodness. Oh, I do believe Sarah, Scarlett O'Hara has just arrived. This is our oldest piece in our collection. This is a 2-piece silk crimson ensemble with jacket and multi-layered flounce skirt. She's also wearing a black velvet bonnet and embroidered fingerless long gloves. She's carrying a reticule. They weren't called purses in those days. They were called reticules. And a silk parasol with lace. And oh, she's also got her sniffing because she's a little nervous, so she's got her sniffing bag there as well. Now, the crinoline hoop, in the early 1800s, women were wearing multiple slips, petticoats, because of the fullness of the skirts. And then crinoline was introduced in 1830. It was a linen material woven with horsehair. The crinoline is French for crin and lin, meaning horsehair and linen respectively. And common decency required that women would wear a minimum of 6 petticoats, crinoline petticoats. However, the natural progression was to as many as 14 by the time Queen Victoria took the stage. Now, the steel cage or hoop underskirt frames, which Scarlett is wearing here, was introduced in 1856. And that was great because then you didn't have all those petticoats and all that weight. And that was continued to be referred to as a crinoline hoop, but it really isn't crinoline. It's a frame hoop. Empress Eugenie Ingenue, and her favorite courtier, Charles Frederick Worth, were universally credited for that introduction of the cage or hoop frame. And women of all classes loved this frame. But what was concerning was there was a lot of air underneath there, so it required a new garment called a pantalette. Now, what's unique about this pantalette is it's crotchless. Well, when you gotta go, right?
Not mine.
We haven't got anybody to model this quite yet. But one of the things that was really interesting about this hoop is that fashionable smuggling occurred. Paris was the reigning influence over the Western fashions during the 19th century, and it dictated American dressmakers and milliners' business practices. They felt that they needed to satisfy their clientele by getting these fashions from Paris. However, unlike today, or like today, however, there was up to a 50% tariff on luxury items brought back from Europe. To avoid paying these exorbitant import taxes, travelers frequently engaged in fashionable smuggling. And these crinoline hoops, skirts, with all their space, was a perfect vehicle. Dressmakers developed tactics like creating pockets under the skirt, sewing items within the lining and underneath the tucks of fabric. There was one New York Times article reported that one woman was able to conceal beneath her hoop skirt 1,000 yards of lace, 6 lengths of expensive silk, 10 ready-to-wear dresses, 3 dozen pairs of gloves, 6 bottles of perfume, and 12 bottles of brandy. I think they should have let her go through just on creativity. The inspectors began to pay attention to fit and silhouette, and they developed an eye for tailoring and looking if the dress was a little too tight sometimes. However, male inspectors had a moral dilemma regarding inspecting in and around a woman's skirt, so they then hired inspectresses to address this issue. Now, also a New York article made the bold statement that crinoline went out of fashion because these fashionable or wealthy travelers didn't want to be inspected, so they started to wear thinner silhouettes, and that's how the crinoline hoops lost their favor. Thank you. Do give our regards to Brett. Oh, poor Diane. I do believe she is in mourning. Diane is wearing a mourning ensemble with a bustle dress. Now, before we get to the dress and the mourning piece, I want you to look at the mantle. This is a velvet cape, and if you look at it really close, it's very long in the front and very short in the back, because with a bustle, who needs more clothing back there, right? So this is a gorgeous piece, and it took us a long time to figure out what the heck this was when we found it. But this is called a mantle, and I'll take it off for you, Diane. Amazing embroidery to it. But now Diane is in mourning, and following Queen Victoria's example, it became customary for families to go through elaborate rituals to commemorate their dead. It included wearing mourning clothes, having a lavish and expensive funeral, and curtailing social behavior. For a set period of time, it was their outward display of their inner feelings. And the rules were very strict, and they had journals or household manuals to explain all that. And they gave copious instructions about appropriate etiquette. And if your second cousin died, you wanted to know what sort of mourning clothes to wear and how long. And so you'd consulted these manuals. The deepest mourning clothes were black, symbolic of spiritual darkness. And the length of mourning depended on your relationship to your deceased. Widows were expected to wear full mourning for 2 years. Everyone else presumably suffered less. For children who were mourning their parents, or vice versa, the period of time was 1 year. For grandparents and siblings, 6 months. Aunts and uncles, 2 months. Great uncles and aunts, 6 weeks. And first cousins, 4 weeks. And the amount of time men wore mourning clothes for their wives was considerably less, because they were expected to get on with their lives. And Queen Victoria wore mourning for 40 years after her Prince Albert passed. And now also I want to show you this bustle, this piece that, if you can see it with this lighting, this is an incredibly beautiful laced piece, dress, many layers to it. But if you think about the hoop, they just basically pulled the fabric back and put it into a bustle. And the bustle is often straw, just a puff pillow of straw. But ladies had to learn how to walk with a bustle. And what they would do is they would take a teacup and put it on the back and see if they could hold the teacup without it falling off. Can you do that, Diane? I'm not sure. I don't know, you look sort of like someone on TV these days. Okay, and also the jewelry during mourning was also very interesting. It was limited to jet beads, much like I have here, that was woven with the hair of the deceased. And there's a whole history around that, and you may want to look into that. It's called the Art of Hair Works. And they made jewelry and framed pictures and all kinds of things of the hair of the deceased. Very fascinating. Thank you, Diane. Shelley. Now we're hitting the prairie lands. Oh, thank you. Now we have a two-piece prairie ensemble from the 1900s. The striking copper brown. The bodice is a high collar, netting, and lace insets over the sleeves. But it's all one bodice, and then there's a skirt. While it looks like a single dress, many of these pieces of the time were very layered. And they have hooks at the waistline. There are hooks and bars linking the top and the bottom. And they're quite a challenge to put on and to figure out how they actually go. But this is a beautiful example of the dress of the 1900s. Now, the dressing was a challenge too. First you put on stockings, then your shoes, then your drawers or pantalettes, then your chemise, your corset, crinoline hoop, and then the dress. So quite a bit of work to get all dressed. And also you may wonder about washing these clothes. What they did with these clothes is they would brush down or rub it with flour, the outer pieces, and then they had lots of undergarments which they would then wash. And wash day was quite a challenge. First you would have to separate it, soak it, boil it, rinse it, blue it, wring it out, starch, and hang it dry, and finally iron it. So it was quite a project on wash day. Thank you, Shelley. Oh, now we're ready to go to bed, I think. Oh, now these ladies are wearing beautiful cotton gowns, and look at the detail. The crocheted bodice of Rachel's is just gorgeous. And her hat is interesting. We couldn't figure out why this hat was this shape. And then we realized she has long hair, so it's put into a bun. So it's very organized as she sleeps. Now she's also carrying something. Do you know what that is? I can't hear you. Chamber pot, right. Yes, because we didn't have indoor plumbing. And so we had to put that under the bed. And sometimes it's in little cabinets. If you go out to the glass house in San Ramon, they have a cabinet, a little chair, if you will, and they just put the chamber pot in it. Also, they used to have fabric covers for it as well. And hopefully you had a servant that would take care of it in the morning, because you certainly wouldn't want to go out into the outhouse in the middle of the night, especially with weather the way it is today. Thank you, Rachel. And Cindy is holding the candle because there was, of course, no electricity, and she had to stay quite warm, so she has long sleeves. And also the crocheted nightcap to keep her head warm as well. Thank you, Cindy. now we're going to go bathing, I think. Oh my goodness. Now we're ready to go bathing, not swimming. I did not say this was swimming because ladies were too genteel and weren't allowed to actually swim in the ocean. So Francie is wearing a bathing costume. This is a one-piece bathing costume. Would you please cover your knees? Yes, yes. No showing those knees. Pulling up the socks. So, nope, pull up your socks, young lady. And she's also carrying a picnic basket, a bamboo picnic basket, one of the first out there, which are kind of fun. Now, popular in the 18th and 19th century were bathing machines. Have any of you heard of bathing machines? Well, they were four-wheel, one-person carriages, and they were covered with wood or canvas sides, and they allowed men and women to change from their Victorian or Edwardian clothing, very stringent clothing, into their bathing costumes and slip into the ocean without being seen by those on the shore. These machines allowed even the most refined females to enjoy the advantages of the sea and the pleasures of bathing in such a private manner. The machines would get into the machine on the beach through one door, change their clothes, get into their bathing costume. The machines would be rolled down into the water, big, huge wheels, and partially into the water. Then Francie would get out the back door into the water, and they often had modesty canopies, so there was absolutely no way anyone could see her from the shore. And when she was done splashing around in the water, not swimming, but splashing, then she would climb back into her bathing machine, and oftentimes they had flags that they would wave to someone on the beach who would then pull the bathing machine out of the water up onto the shore so Francie could change and be off again. Now, these machines are really fascinating, and you can look at Queen Victoria's. It's on display at the Isle of Wight in England. Very fascinating stories. Thank you, Francie. Oh, now we're actually going for more sporting attire. This is a baseball two-piece outfit. It's wool. So can you imagine? It has a Spalding label in it, and it came with holes in the knees. So somebody really had a great time with this years past. There are multiple buttons at the waistline to attach the top to the pantaloons. And she's got her baseball bat, and she's properly not showing any leg. Thank you, Rachel. Do have a fun time out at the game. And more exercise. Shelley's ready to exercise here. She is wearing a cotton bloomer style gym suit. And this was a gift from a friend of my mother's to me. And it's cotton, but it has a detachable midi collar. And she is carrying her very, very heavy 1.5 pound wood dumbbells. And I saw some of these on the internet recently. They were made by Spalding in circa 1920 and valued at $245. So some of the pieces are very expensive. Now, women didn't bathe or wash their hair often, and so we asked Shelley to keep her arms down. And when she gets hot, she can actually cool off, because there was no air conditioning in those gyms, right? So she'd just cool off there, and then she'd button up and look skinny once again. So thank you, Shelley. Keep those arms down, please. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, Adriana is showing one of my favorite pieces. This is a 1902 three-piece wedding ensemble that was given to us just recently. It was donated in June of 2016 by Betty Larson of Brentwood. It's an example of cut work lace, white work, which is also referred to as the white embroidery on white fabric. It has bobbin lace, and it's also, I mentioned it's three pieces. It's a dress, but look at the detail in this slip. We don't see this in these days. Now, she also has a jacket. Now, the dress, you can't really tell, but it used to be long sleeve, and somebody cut the sleeves off. No. So, we think this might be repurposed fabric, and oftentimes people used fabric over and over again, calling it repurposed, because as the seams, if you look at the seams on this, they overlap where there's embroidery. So we suspect that this is repurposed. Maybe a tablecloth years ago? We don't know. But it's very, very pretty. And interestingly, this is from 1902. And at the time, the hats were very big. The hair was very big, and the hats were very, very big. But I do believe this gal was just ahead of her time, because it was really only in the late 1910s and into the 20s when the hats really got small. But we have a picture of her in her wedding dress, and we're so pleased that she was nice enough to donate this to our show. Isn't it beautiful? Do have a lovely wedding. And Heidi is showing us a traveling outfit from the 1900s, a tan and black linen Edwardian traveling suit. And it was, in that era, it was quite an undertaking to travel, usually by train, coach, or even horseback. But Heidi looks like she's traveling in elegance all the way. The swallowtail jacket with frog closures, lots of embroidery on this jacket, ever-present gloves to keep her hands delicately smooth, vintage leather boots, vintage hat that is fun. I really love this hat. A tan parasol, and I do believe she is going to travel in style. Thank you. Heidi, do have a lovely trip. Oh, Lily. We call this our Titanic suit, but we do think that this might be Mary Crowley of Downton Abbey. Doesn't it look like something on TV? Now, this might be a Charles Frederick Worth original. We're not sure, but he was the first couture in Paris. He was an Englishman who became the father of couture in Paris in the 1850s. And this is a silk wool blend with embroidery and lace. And there are lead weights in the hem of this dress, making it very, very heavy. But the weights were really to have the dress hang well. And we certainly would not want her to show any ankle. No, no, no. Thank you. Thank you, Lily. Oh, uh-oh. Now, Cindy is wearing a linen duster, ready to ride away in her touring motor car, or Tin Lizzie is the vernacular of the day. Originally, these linen dusters were worn by horsemen. By the turn of the century, they were worn by both men and women to protect their clothing when riding in open motor cars on the dirt roads of the day. She's wearing an aviator helmet of soft cloth to keep her hair from blowing. More sedate ladies of the day wore brimmed hats, tied on, but not our Cindy. Nope, and she's got gauntlet gloves and brown leather shoes of the day. Now, she's wearing goggles since the windshields were very low, if any at all, and the eyes needed protection while racing along on the dirt roads of an astounding 10 to 15 miles an hour. Once she arrived at her destination, she'd go into the powder room, remove her duster, scarf, gloves, and wash up so she wouldn't look like a raccoon. And she'd be ready to party. Now, the Ford Motor Company in 1908 advertised their Model Ts for the great multitudes for an unheard of price of $850 for a 4-cylinder, 20 horsepower, 5-passenger motor car. Powerful, speedy, and enduring. An extra $100 would buy such amenities as a windshield, speedometer, and headlamps. And by 1916, the prices dropped to $360 for the basic touring car. And I believe they've gone up ever since. Now, this is the time. Here we go, ladies. Give her the old. We have our very own suffragette. We have Ginger is part of the brave new world as our very own suffragette. She's got her swallowtail jacket and a very feminine vest, carrying a warm sable muff, and a flower pot. Well, maybe the less we talk about that hat, the better. But the suffragette movement really began with Susan B. Anthony in 1868, with efforts in the United States really beginning to build up steam in 1913. And that, of course, was the beginning of World War I. She actually, Susan B. Anthony actually co-wrote the 19th Amendment, which was enacted in August 29, 1920, giving us the right to vote and a voice in politics. And we haven't been silent since, have we, ladies? In California, we actually won the right to vote in 1911, but it's not all done yet, because in 1971 in Switzerland, they finally gave their women the right to vote. In 2015 in Saudi Arabia, whether they get to actually vote is another question. But I do encourage you to watch the movie Iron-Jawed Angels. It's a movie addressing Alice Paul and Lucy Burns and other suffragettes, and how they suffered, were incarcerated, and tortured for our opportunity to vote. Once you see this and see how they suffered, I venture you will never, ever miss an opportunity to vote. And when this country was founded, only white male landowners could vote. So go out and vote. Every opportunity. Thank you. Okay, now we've gone from the depressing World War I, we've gone through the suffragette movement, and now look out, because we've got the flappers. Flappers, flappers. Shelley is the first flapper here. She's got a real interesting orange velvet piece, and the hemline, the neckline, or the waistline is just below the waist. Most of them are dropped more like Francie's. But this has incredible beading on it. And notice the beading is not in the front neckline, it's in the back neckline. And the reason we found out was because you had jewels in the front, so you didn't want it to snag on the bead. So that's why there's beading in the back. That's how we figured out which was the front and which was the back. Now, of course, there's jewels, jewels, jewels. Now, the flappers definitely were emphasizing a very tall, thin, and boyish figure. Unlike the curvy corset, this is where they had actual flatteners, which actually flattened the breasts. And they were elastic, and some were tied on the side. They were referred to as flatteners. Now, these flappers were definitely showing the naughty girl look, embracing all things modern. They showed disdain for conventional dress and behavior. They developed complete new sets of behavior patterns. They wore makeup and applied it in public. They drank in public. They tried to smoke in public and with long holders, and they exposed their limbs. Gone were the hobbled skirts, the bustles and corsets. And aren't we having fun now? Thank you, ladies. Now, the rising hemline was denounced by both government and pulpit, and all the jazz babies had to have at least a beaded rope necklace or two. Now, Heidi is showing a cape that really warrants a look, a real close look. This is a velvet cape with glass beads, and this is just an elegant piece that's in great shape for how old it is, 100 years old. A wonderful neckline to it as well. Now, these ladies were also all wearing headache bands, very popular accessory for their fashion. We're not sure whether the headache band was so tight that it gave you a headache or kept you from getting a headache, but we like to say it's the start of, not tonight, dear, I have a headache. Now, they're also, by the mid-1900s, and Heidi is showing a black dress, flapper dress with lots of fringe, and hers is a little bit longer. What happened in 1929? The crash. So all the hemlines crashed, dropped again. So this is probably later in the 20s. Also, I wanted to mention bob hair. Francie has a little bit of the bob hair. That hairstyle really swept the nation. And doctors warned of flapper rash, which was a scalp irritation if they bobbed their hair, and the bobby pin was also invented at that time. At the time also, Marshall Field's department store, some of you might remember that store, it refused to employ women that didn't have at least hair down to the shoulder length. So, thank you, Heidi. Do enjoy your party tonight. Oh, now we are going into the 30s, and this is the era of Hollywood, and with our flamenco, not flamingo, but flamenco dress. She is ready to dance the flamenco with this beautiful layered piece, and she's got a boa that she's carrying, but do look at if you drop the boa on the back, you can see the glass beads. Absolutely spectacular detail to this piece. Isn't that gorgeous? Thank you, Diane. Oh, she's going to enjoy the evening. To have an enjoyable time. There was such a dichotomy in the 30s where Hollywood and all the elegance of Hollywood came out, when, on the other hand, there was the Depression. It's an amazing dichotomy. Thank you, Diane. And actually, let me take a minute to show you my piece. This is a piece that was given to me by my great-great-aunt, and it was given actually to my mother for me to play in when I was a little girl. And Mom was smart enough to put it away, and when I joined this group, then I had to sew on quite a few beads, but then we put it in. But notice the length. It's very straight, boyish look, very unfitted sheath. There were really three silhouettes. There's the bustle, there's the hoop, and then the straight sheath. And I'm so glad that the bustle never came back, right? Or the hoop. But even the jewelry and the gloves were all my great aunts, so it's kind of fun to wear it. But it certainly could be worn. In the 20s, there were more female designers, and so the clothes were more realistic and more wearable and could be worn today. I've seen dresses very similar to this at Macy's, so it's amazing how the fashion sort of slowed down after the 20s. But we do have our ladies of the night here. You're entertaining at home. Yes. Yes. Lily has a beautiful negligee for entertaining her husband at home. This is the negligee began to mimic women's satin single-layer evening dresses of that period. Don't you all just get dressed like this to entertain at home at night? No? This is beautiful brocade piece. Thank you, Lily. And Rachel, now we're getting into the 40s here. This piece was handmade by someone in our group quite a while back. These are all hand-sewn-on beads in this bodice. And very interesting sleeves. They're kind of paneled sleeves. Very interesting. Cut on the bias, no zipper here. And she's carrying a clutch purse. Beautiful, isn't it? In the 30s, we did so much with the bias. Thank you, Rachel. How many of you remember ribbon dresses? These are ribbon dresses that two samples of them, and they're just gorgeous pieces, very interesting colors. Now, we do have quite a few furs in our shows, and Adriana is showing us Stone Martins, I believe. And we do want to apologize to anyone that's an animal activist, but these animals have been dead a long time. And we've hesitated to show all the furs, but it is the look of the time, and I think it's important to see what we've done to our animals. And there were sumptuary laws which said you couldn't wear a fur. There were laws of who could wear fur and who could not. And the sumptuary laws don't apply to us, right, ladies? Now, Cindy is showing us a beautiful dress, but this jacket was just given to us. This is a leopard jacket. And again, very sad what we've done to our animals, but it's important to show this to make us aware of what we're doing to our animal world. And she has a fun fascinator hat too as well. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, ladies. You know, we had quite a few models today, and we have, so they're moving quickly, but normally it's a little bit slow in the beginning because the automatic continuous clothing closure wasn't invented until the 1856 by Isaiah Howe. And he was focused on developing the sewing machine and was fighting Singer, and actually won a lawsuit with Singer, but he didn't focus on the automatic continuous clothing closure, so it died off. And then it was reintroduced in 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair as the hookless fastener. And then in 1925, it was introduced finally as B.F. Goodrich put it on the galoshes and named it, can you guess? The zipper, right. So if you have any clothing that has zippers, it wasn't utilized until the late 30s, even for children's clothing, to make them more self-reliant in dressing. And so even the adults was very late 30s into the 40s when we first saw zippers. But it originally was the automatic continuous clothing closure. Oh my goodness, Shelley's been busy. Shelley. This is our one and only maternity dress. This is, we believe, from the 40s, and it's a wool dress, and it's okay today, but she won't model this in the summertime. It's quite a challenge to put on. The top piece is a full jacket, but it's attached at the shoulder, sleeveless, but it's attached at the shoulder. And I do believe she's going to give birth any moment. And she has a mushroom-style hat with floral embellishments. Very pretty. Thank you, Shelley. Oh. And it is February, so we wanted to show you our red Valentine Dress. But before we do that, Heidi is showing a coat. Can any of you think you know what kind of fur this is? Come on, shout it out. This is an interactive show. Bear? No. Beaver? No. Gorilla? No. It is skunk. It does not smell. This was given to us by a gal in Castro Valley. Her mother was a Rosie the Riveter. She worked in Richmond at the on the Liberty ships. She couldn't afford mink, so she got this skunk coat. It's in beautiful condition. It has the padded shoulders and very comfortable. Could be worn today, but certainly no one would want to wear it at this point. But I was telling a friend of mine about this coat, and she says, well, you know, my grandfather used to hunt skunks in this area, skin them, and send the pelts to New York. So these might be local skunks. We're not sure. And now Heidi is showing what we refer to as the Valentine Dress. Beautiful design. It has a bird tail panel in the back. Christian Dior tried to bring back the bustle, and this is one of the looks of just that bird tail panel. And sometimes we have big bows in the back, but fortunately the bustle did not come back. But doesn't she look like she's quite ready to party? With her fascinator hat as well. Thank you. Oh, Cindy is wearing a beautiful piece that was given to us by a woman in Rossmore. And it has beautiful panels, lots of gathering, very interesting gathering on this. And she's quite elegant in her dress, ready for the elegant party of the 40s with her velvet cape. And she also has a little bit of a panel in the back, another bird tail panel in the back as well. Somewhat, a little bit of a bustle in the back there. Thank you, Cindy. Ginger is showing us a piece, a cream-colored cocktail dress from the 60s, we believe. It has, with this cape that's a velvet cape with embroidery, but we believe this is an Irene Sargent original. Any of you remember Irene Sargent? No, she was a designer originally based in Centerville, born in Centerville, now known as Fremont, in 1908, and she was very famous. She had her boutique in Oakland, and it gained reputation for one of the most expensive, elegant boutiques in the Bay Area. She was recognized in Women's Wear Daily and she was recognized in New York and Europe. And she provided very elegant boutique in Oakland, where there were 10 individually decorated fitting rooms. Each offered a telephone, a bank of three-way mirrors, chairs for the shopper, and a companion. Custom designed clothing racks, artwork from her own private collection. And for the shopper's companion, she provided a cozy retreat, a plush den with bar, fireplace, and television. She even kept a full-time cook to cater to the customer's culinary whims. Not quite what we see today in the dressing rooms of today. She passed in 1999, but very exciting. Yes. And our final piece today is what we refer to as our leopard piece. This is quite elegant. Can anyone guess what this hat is? The fur on this hat? It's gorilla. It is gorilla. We didn't realize it at first, and we were hesitant to even show it after we realized it was gorilla. But again, we want to be sure that people really understand what we've done to our animal world. And it is gorgeous. We have a jacket as well, but beautiful fur, but hopefully we don't continue this habit. But this is a really pretty leopard dress, and it's a halter top with ostrich feather trim. Looking lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. One more piece. One more piece. Yes. To celebrate, we have, yes, another gorilla jacket. This is another gorgeous piece. And Francie is definitely ready to party with this dress as well. Shall I take the jacket off for you? This is definitely the piece de resistance, isn't it? This dress is definitely ready for any New Year's party. And it was, Neiman Marcus promoted a dress very much like this just recently for $25,000. Isn't this gorgeous? I think you could definitely party in this anytime. Thank you. She's ready to party in it. Thank you, Francie. Yes, go ahead and stretch out. Ladies? And that completes our show, but just want to have the ladies come out one more time. We rarely have this many models, so we got to see quite a few outfits today. Thank you, ladies. And thank you to our pianist, Shannon, playing beautiful music for us today. Thank you. We want to also thank Amy for coordinating this. Every show is different. We have brochures if you're interested. I can hand out brochures afterwards. But all this money that we collect does go to Goodwill. And their mission is to take your donations and turn them into jobs with the work training and job placement. And they do a fabulous job. I can't give them enough credit. But if you do have any interest in another show, I have brochures here for you and more in the back. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.